Okay. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for being here. This is a special press conference. We wanted to inform you about the TiSA agreement and our position as the GUE NGL group. We consider the TiSA as the kind of the ugly twin sister of TTIP, because first of all, there is no need for such a child monster. If there was a need to adjust the GATS agreement into the present circumstances, we could modernize or modify the GATS agreement. But this is a plan imposed by the multinationals against the states, against the medium and small enterprises, against the citizens and the data protection, the environment, and also the right of the voters to change with their votes the policy of a certain country or a city if this is not correspond to their interests. According to TiSA, no previous agreements for privatization, etc., could be modified. So if Strasbourg privatizes the water system and then the citizens decide by their vote to change it, they cannot do it if TiSA is implemented. So in the proceedings, Mrs. Reding, the rapporteur for this, the opinion of the Parliament to the Commission, tried a little bit to make a kind of to present the most beautiful side of this TiSA agreement. She tried to, let's say, to do a facelifting, to present it like a more beautiful agreement. But the reality, it is not like this. And even if all the recommendations of the Parliament and Mrs. Reding are taken into consideration, nothing will change. But after a hot debate yesterday, I will finish the introduction by telling you what was the answer of Mrs. Reding or Mrs. Malmström after they criticise and everything. So Mrs. Cecilia Malmström, the Commissioner, said after the debate, "Thank you for the Reding's report. No problem at all for Commission. We will continue to negotiate TiSA and as an ambitious, just as we did." Okay, so it's business as usual, even if they take into consideration, they will continue like this to negotiate in favor of the multinational. This is well, I'm giving the floor to Thomas Handel, who is a rapporteur on TiSA for Employment Committee and chair of this committee.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to focus on three aspects. As Stelios already said, I want to focus mainly on areas of interest to the Employment Committee. But just a preliminary comment. The fact that the EPP is saying something about TiSA is good, but simply wagging our finger a little bit and saying some rather meaningless things. There's not much else in the Reding report. Since 2007, the Globalization Fund has been used in 64 cases, and billions in taxpayers' money have been used to compensate workers for the effects of globalization, all because of this free trade ideology as described by Stelios. In the Employment Committee, we focused on three aspects. First of all, if this free trade agreement is concluded, then inevitably the core ILO standards, the 8 core standards of the International Labour Organization, will have to be incorporated into this agreement, and those will have to be binding on all contracting parties, which at the moment is around 50. Quite simply, the European capital is seeking extreme increase in profits and expects to achieve this by exporting services from the European Union to the rest of the world. And we have to ensure that the provisions on non-discrimination, on child labour, on equal treatment in the workplace, collective bargaining, and collective interest representation in companies have to be guaranteed, and that European companies cannot undermine these standards by applying the standards of the destination, country of destination, and vice versa. Any service which is offered on the European market, or any investor cannot operate with dumping wages and use appalling social and working conditions to undermine our standards. That is why anchoring the ILO standards in this agreement is so important. It must be binding, and there must be sanctions attached to it. So these core standards must be enforceable as well. Those were the main demands of the Employment Committee. That has not been taken on board. In Mrs. Redding's current report, you simply have non-binding wording on that, should be taken into account, etc. That's too little, and the Employment Committee of the European Parliament cannot approve that. The second point I want to focus on is that we want to have guarantees that all institutions, all forms of provisions of social and public services, kindergartens, schools, health institutions, etc., that we need to have guarantees that they will be excluded from the agreement. So we will not see a privatization of these services which are indispensable for citizens. We do not want to have Coca-Cola supplying our water in the future, or McDonald's running company canteens or school canteens, or our kindergartens run by Toys R Us. That has to be prevented in this agreement. And thirdly, we are absolutely determined to prevent these plans to make it possible to go back on privatization. The agreement says that anything that is privatized, that is irrevocable and cannot be reversed. So public kindergartens, etc., will have no possibility to reverse a process of privatization, and there would be a kind of an automation of privatization of public services in the future. But this is something that we will not go along with. We clearly reject this. My group and the members of the Employment Committee will not accept that. Free trade cannot work in this way. This is a socially unacceptable form of free trade, and we are not going to go along with this.
Thank you, Thomas. And now the floor to Mr. Emmanuel Morel. He is the member of INTA, International Trade, for the Social Democrat group.
Oui, merci. Peut-être c'est vrai que...
Thank you. I'm not a member of GUE. We have differences in how we evaluate things, and I don't have the same evaluation, which is not only the Reading report, which has been negotiated with many political groups, but what is of interest in such a debate is that we can advocate another type of globalization, and the problem that we have with TiSA is the well-foundedness of such a negotiation. I understand when you say you have to adapt the rules to the digital revolution, but does that mean that we're going to have mega trade agreements? And the risk is that we may have a TTIP which is in disguise, or a Bolkestein system. So we have to be extremely vigilant, and many left-wing MEPs are very vigilant, and the shadow rapporteur was in the forefront in order to set a certain number of limits and red lines. But how can we make the public more aware of the situation and try to do something in order to not to accept deregulation, because that is the principal risk. We know, thanks to experience, and we know what liberalizations have taken place in European history and which led to catastrophes. So the idea is not, there's not only the fact that everything is very opaque, but the very content of the agreement is not clear, and all the doubts we may harbor have not been dispelled, and we see the political risks which are before us. So we have to make the public aware of this. We have to unite with the left wing parties and all those who would like to join us. Thank you.
Hello, Lola Sanchez, rapporteur on TiSA, pour le development, the committee.
Buenas tardes y...
Good afternoon, and many thanks, Stelios. I'm the rapporteur of the Development Committee on the TiSA report, and this was in fact approved unanimously by the Development Committee. But there are a number of points I would like to highlight before the vote tomorrow. The Development Committee would like to see that Article 208 should be applied, namely that all policies of the Union should not undermine the development policy as such, and therefore it should be incorporated in all trade negotiations. It's true that the rapporteur has included these words in her report, but we have doubts that this is going to be, it's just like a pipe dream. When you look at the objectives of sustainable development, namely that one should respect the political space of each member state, and one can talk about legislation, etc., but the ultimate objective of TiSA means that the development of countries will not be truly taken into account. So there is the Doha round, where developing countries have a certain number of votes. Then you have to look at the text. The report does not ask the Commission to elaborate an impact study in developing countries, and therefore we cannot what will happen about the development objectives, and then this is something that will be looked into in New York in the autumn. Now, what is very serious is that when an agreement is negotiated, nobody is consulted, and in all secrecy, with terms of reference which was secret for for a very long time. It's very difficult to change things now. Now there is the text of the TTIP, and as an MEP, before being an MEP, I'm a citizen, and I would like to have the text in order to be able to read it and interpret it. In the report, we are told that the service sector provides for a very large percentage in developing countries, but it just gives the figures and doesn't go beyond that. And why doesn't it say something more? Because any legislator who is well informed would vote against such a report. It's quite grotesque to say that to have a macro agreement we don't really truly take into account what developing countries would have to say. In fact, they are mostly excluded. Now, the report demands that there should be a multilateral agreement in the future. But when everything is completed and completely negotiated, and therefore the developing countries won't be able to say anything about it, and this is the type of globalization imposed by TiSA. If we truly want a multilateral agreement and which takes into account development policy, we are not on the right path. Now, as for equality between gender equality, this agreement will certainly have an impact in the services sector in Africa, where the number of women are much present in greater numbers. It doesn't protect human rights properly, and simply focuses mainly on financial services. So it requires the Commission to liberalize the financial services, which will lead to the crisis that we've had now, because there is very little regulation of the financial world. There's nothing about the debt and the lenders, and there is greater volatility instead of economic stability. And the rapporteur stresses that there should be greater availability of financial services throughout the world. So it is a text that sets a number of values, but it goes completely against them, and it only protects the multinationals. She mentions the fundamental charter, the 2030 objective, and the ILO's regulations. And all these rights are mentioned, but the agreement will make labor conditions much more difficult for the workers, and social and labor legislation will be reduced, and it will in fact reduce living conditions in developing countries. So for all these reasons, we're going to vote against this particular report. Thank you.
Okay. You
need to leave, do you? Thank you very much for coming.
Questions, please? Yes?
Hello, Pablo García for El Diario. I think it's a question for Mr. Handel, which is member of the Employee Committee. Regarding the International Labour Organization, the TiSA includes a mention to ensure the respect of the 8 international Labour Organization's conventions. But do you think it is not enough? Do you think that doesn't mean ratification of these rules?
In the Employment Committee, okay, well, we'll just wait for you to put on your headphones. in the Employment Committee, we have very often had to deal with this issue of the ILO core standards. And we have seen these kind of wording, should be taken into account, must be taken account of, etc. But I think the real crux is whether you behave properly. Countries like the US or Turkey or Afghanistan simply ignore these recommendations. The US is a member of the ILO, but it hasn't ratified the ILO core standards. It has only ratified 2 of them. So these kind of weak wordings are inadequate. We want to have them anchored in the agreement so that they are binding on all of the signatories. And anyone who does not comply with it can actually be subject to legal action taken by workers. So that is the legal prerequisite. I like to drive fast. And in Germany, I think there are far too many traffic signs, numbers that oblige me to slow down. I'm not too happy about that. If I'm sure that no one is going to catch me and no one is going to slap a fine on me, then I can simply disregard the speed limits. So the right for the weak only becomes a right if the weak party can enforce it. If there are no sanctions, it is of no use at all. It is simply an appeal, and people can choose to ignore it. And that is why the Employment Committee is not happy with this wording.
You want to follow up?
It's not a follow-up, it's another question on this, if I may. Do you expect any division tomorrow, like it happened in the TTIP, in the Socialist Party or the others? Because they seem quite divided on that question. So I don't know if you expect something on that.
Yeah, we know that there are differences within other groups, but we don't intend to take advantage of it. We have proposed a lot of amendments we think in the good direction to protect the labor rights, the environment, the data protection, the right of the states to decide for themselves. And we hope that all deputies will vote for it, independently of the group they are belonging. That's all. You want to add something?
Bueno, nosotros,
as Telio said, we hope that some of the most important amendments we're going to submit tomorrow will be adopted and will be included in the text. But the socialist group at the beginning was in favor of this report. As we've all said, the jargon that's used is wonderful. And may I just make an aside, we're quite sure that a lot has been learned thanks to the experience of last year on the TTIP. So the text is less aggressive, and it has included a number of things that different political groups have suggested. However, but I think this is somewhat naive to think, and I'm not being offensive, but that this report will set a number of red lines that need not to be crossed by the Commission. What Commissioner Malmström said yesterday, yes, we're going to try. but what we are concerned with is employment, and that is always what is being said. Now, she thinks, and that's what we felt yesterday when we listened to her, that this we shouldn't think that this will be turned into a negotiating gambit. So this text is really it's really just a basket that is being proposed by the European Commission.
Yes.
Oui, en fait, c'est une question peut-être un peu.
It may be a slightly naive question, but on the European Commission's website, on the TiSA treaty, it says under the FAQs, there's a question.
Or local governments from regulating or distributing water. Et ils répondent, no, it will not. In the TiSA talks, the EU has ensured that EU member states can take any measure that they choose which affect the way they manage, collect, purify or distribute water. The TiSA will not affect this right in any way. J'ai cru comprendre que vous ne disiez.
But I understood you to be saying something slightly different. So what is the truth?
Compris.
Well, I think you've understood quite well.
This is not the case. They are trying, as I said in the beginning, they are trying to facelifting, to present the beautiful side of an agreement, which is not the case. They still don't want to. They still to maintain the ratchet standstill clauses that stipulate that the agreements made so far cannot be changed. So if for instance the port of Piraeus is privatized, which is the case, and the new government comes and says, well, we want it back in public and we'll pay for it, you cannot do it. And this is, but since they all understand that people do not want this and people are against this, they are trying to to present it in a more pleasant and positive side. But we're very skeptical. Both the Reding's recommendations and what they really think is that they're going to a direction to liberalize everything, to deregulate everything. And for us, the major test would be, and we can discuss it as long as this process is going on, well, why not to ask at the end of the TiSA agreement, when the TiSA agreement is ready, why not to ask the people about that? Let's do, and let's make a European referendum to ask the people if they are in favor of TiSA. That will give the chance for the people to be informed with every detail about the agreement and to vote on it. You know what will happen? They will not accept this proposition. They will not accept that because they are afraid, and because the people understand very well that there is no need for a new agreement that liberalizes everything. We had enough of this, and Lola very good mentioned the financial services, which are backing very strongly the TiSA agreement, and we are still paying in the whole Europe, especially in the south, in Spain, in Greece, for the the abuse and the casino capitalism of the financial services, And now they want more liberalization. We are against this.
Ich kenne jetzt die genaue Frage und Antwort.
I can't remember exactly that frequently asked question that you quoted, but I can imagine what's behind it. And that is the kind of question and answer that I can't bear. Of course, every local authority in Europe is free to decide which services they offer. However, if they decide to give something to a service provider, they have to have a public call for tender. And in 99% of all cases, it goes to the lowest bidder. Water, Veolia, etc., I think you get what I mean. And the lowest bidder is very often the one who doesn't respect the supply contract, who pays low wages, etc. So the Commission's answer is both true and false. Under this agreement, we will see the same thing happening again that we saw 2 or 3 years ago when we discussed water privatization here in the Parliament, that public goods will be put out to tender, but there will be, as soon as the state starts thinking about setting up their own company to provide this service, say it decides only to set up a company that would only deal with water, and in that situation, under European law, it would have to issue a European call for tender, and under TiSA it would have to be a global tender, and the lowest bidder would get the contract. So you can see that some answers can be true and false at the same time. It's not the whole truth.
We have to close now. Thank you very much for the press conference.